with this stuff in counselling and that type of theory, we're trying to do two things. One, find the true self,
Yeah.
right, and the true self, and the other to find the whole self.
Yeah.
Right now, with the whole self in the way I do things in counselling, and I've got a whole system that Madonna and we're going to do a group program on soon. That
Body,
actually,
mind, heart, soul.
yeah. So we look at the whole person. So we'll go through and we'll look at the body, right, which is the body in counselling. That's attending skills, which are we observe people, see how their eyes are when they talk. You observe everything, you feel,
Yeah.
what's the voice like, and that's all attending, and that's body. In these are in micro skills. In mind, mentally, you've got reflection of ideas. So you reflect back to the client, what are their ideas? Oh, you're saying this, and then they'll clarify. And you might have an hour session. You say basically they're saying this, and this, and they go
Yeah.
yes, and you go, well, you've kind of pruned a whole bunch of stuff, and you've helped them abbreviate it, which
I think
makes
I've said before, because my life is a bit of an open book. So I think I've said before in my videos that my hubby and I actually did some counselling in the last few years, because we had a few fairly huge things going on in our lives. And it was really interesting because we've been married for, well, this year, 34 years. So we'd been married for 30 plus years at the time. And it was hilarious. I had no idea how he thought about some things.
right.
Even though we have big discussions and talk about stuff, there was something about the way that the counsellor asked the questions that got him to say why he thought the way he thought about things, which is a whole different thing to me being in a relationship and asking, but then everyone, quite often people feel judged, or, it might change the intent of what they're saying, just the fact that someone they love is asking them something. So anyway, the whole third person counselor thing is really quite empowering.
Right. And then the mind, we've got that reflection of meaning. We're looking at people's thoughts and what they're thinking, and often reflecting back to them. It's the first time they've heard them, because it goes around in our head. Like you say, we don't talk to anyone about it, but then we express it. And then as a counselor, you say, oh, you're saying this. And they're like, oh, I've heard myself. Thoughts. And then reflection of feelings. You want to get to the bottom of what's being felt or what's being not felt, because a lot of feelings are blocked as well. And then there's the creative side, which is they're things like, they call them focusing and empathetic challenge, which is the creative and spiritual side, because what that does, it challenges people to get more into their unconscious. So you say, because what people are thinking isn't necessarily what's going on, because thinking is often blocking feeling.
Yeah.
Right? Like when people in a couple are in a fighting pattern, it's all about words. There's no feeling going on. There's just the feeling's been blocked, and getting underneath that, there's a whole new set of feelings that you might have been.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so in counselling, that's how like body, mind, heart, soul works. But also, and this is a holistic principle. And then also we want to see how those things are affecting people socially in their public life, and also at work or at school. How are the finances going? And then at home in the private life. And then spiritually, how are people doing their self-care? How are they regenerating? And then, as you were saying earlier, there's a lot of people trying to calibrate faith or belief at the moment in spirituality. And because a lot of Buddhist and Hindu things have made their way into counselling, not as religious things, but as practices, like mindfulness is a part of yoga and Buddhism.
Yeah, and people namaste, it's such a common thing
but
now.
that's where it actually came from. And even though it's made its way into psychological theory, its sources are coming out of Eastern. And because those things weren't really in the Western culture, they're really helpful, because we just didn't have anything in our toolbox.
Yeah.
And when ACT therapy came about, attention and commitment therapy, they started using mindfulness then. It was in the early 2000s, and that's when it started coming out. And then people like Dan Siegel, who are in integration, Dan Siegel, look him up, same thing. We're looking at mindfulness and how to use mindfulness to get up to the prefrontal part of the brain so we can think more holistically. So one side is holism, a part of becoming, but the other side is trying to find out. So that's like looking at ourselves in a broader way.
Yeah.
But then in an essential way, we have so many parts of ourselves, like one dealing is with complex trauma. So we look at the way family systems work, because in our life we've ended up developing these types of false selves, and they're ego related things, like and a lot of them are automatic from your childhood system, and others are things that have grown in life, but they're not really authentic. And so by breaking those things down in counseling work, by just, like, examples are people with childhood trauma. That's often the cause of addiction.
Yeah.
Right? And it's directly, and so often the cause of being angry, often the cause of being manipulative. And so even though people who have a complex trauma background, difficulty and stress in their childhood, it often makes them, there's a twofold thing. One is you're more likely to be re-victimized if you were victimized as a child. But the other thing, we develop these adaptations to cope that once we become adults aren't helpful anymore. And so we can look at those things and work out what they are. And then by pulling them down, we start to find a more authentic self by uncovering those things. And maybe we haven't seen that. And so we want to grow those authentic parts of ourselves. And then we start to find a true self, and then we start coming, because often we get, like Bob Dylan says, pushed out of shape by society's flyers. So we want to get ourselves back in shape, because in that, like, whether we've been controlled, whether we've been abused, whether we've been manipulated, we end on a path that isn't really ourselves. It's more what other people want us to be. So the goal is to start to get new parts of ourselves that are more related to what we really need as people, rather than what we've been programmed to need. So those two functions of becoming authentic is one, getting below our ego and finding what our authentic, and then Jung's definition of healing is wholeness, so that we'll become whole and we'll become more authentic and less egotistic.
Awesome. So, body, mind, heart, soul.
Body, mind, and soon Madonna and I will be doing some body, mind, heart, soul projects with group work. So we'll be able to look at the physiology and also the emotional, mental, and spiritual sides of these things, and how they integrate into those parts of our lives, socially, vocationally, privately, and spiritually.
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
It'll be so much fun.
Excellent. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.